thanks a lot, and thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody for coming. My job here, really, is to kind of explain, particularly for people who haven't been part of this before, and for anybody who's listening in the outside world. Where is the camera? Where's my best side? Okay, all right. Is kind of how did we get here, really? And this came, as we've already heard a little bit, from a summit that was called earlier this year, in very, very early spring. That came out of NHS Change Day, and it came particularly out of David Nicholson, the previous CEO of NHS England, having made a personal pledge to try and put in hand the sorting out of what had become something of an orphan, a Cinderella service, which was wheelchair services. It didn't have an overarching manager or person responsible for it. And that brought input from a lot of people. There was quite a big number of people in the room. There were a lot of wheelchair users. There were a lot of carers and members of families. There were some commissioners, some providers. There were some omissions, which we've tried to fix in the meantime, because we left some important names off the list and important sections of people, which we've tried to correct in the meantime, and we've had great input from them. So one of the things, of course, that arose out of this was a huge unburdening of the anger and frustration that wheelchair users and their families have felt. I just want to give you a little taste of this, because I'm sure, really, I'm preaching to the converted. But before going along to the summit, I went along to my wheelchair basketball team, and in a moment of calm between the mania, I said, what are people's experience of wheelchair services like then? And I was kind of blown back against the wall, and I was assailed for 10 minutes by people who were really upset, people who've been using wheelchair services a lot longer than I have. And it was about basic stuff. It was about working with really well-meaning people, definitely, but also it was about the difficulty of getting repairs, of waiting 6 weeks for a new caster. So a guy's trapped in his house for 6 weeks. And actually, then somebody turned up and diagnosed that he needed a new caster. He said, yeah, I knew that. I told you that. Have you got one on the van? No, I've got to order one. You know, this is just stupid. But people also talking about just not getting the best chair for them. So lots of people end up not like I've got, which is a really nice, super light chair, but with heavy chairs that are cumbersome, and they end up with sore hands, sore shoulders, repeated surgeries on those joints. I play with a guy who's had 8 lots of surgery on his hands, mostly from using a very, very heavy chair, and a young mum with 2 toddlers who's had hand surgery 2 or 3 times. So here you're talking about running up all sorts of crazy costs within the NHS, in addition to the cost of providing the wheelchair, costs which probably wouldn't have arisen if people had been given the right chair in the first place. But you're also talking about long, difficult knock-on costs, financial costs, emotional costs, psychological isolation costs of just not being able to get outside in your chair. If you can't use your chair properly, if you can't get up a curb or get up a mild slope, you can't really get out of the house. That means you can't get on a bus, you can't get to work, or you can't get to school. So you're not working, and probably as a result as well, if it's not the right chair, you're probably dependent on somebody else who also, guess what, can't work. So you're racking up these ridiculous costs in things like state benefits, in lack of education, lost opportunities, and depression, and, you know, all this knock-on stuff which really ought to be very avoidable. And society loses generally then, because a lot of these folks are locked away in their houses and not contributing to society and ideas and creativity. So, short-term savings are a real bugbear with wheelchairs, I think, and not realistic at all. So, first summit started to address this stuff. There was a lot of energy in the room. That's one of my bugbears as well, because obviously it's not enough. There were outcomes. We identified 6 work streams, and stuff has been happening within those work streams. We also know NHS England is working on 3 really important strands, and NHS IQ has come on board relatively recently, but with fantastic enthusiasm. So here today we're looking at what has been happening, and we'll see some of that reflected. We'll be able to say what's good about it and what's bad about it, what might be frustrating about it. Really important stuff from NHS IQ, because that's about building a really important campaign publicly to raise awareness, raise anger, raise motivation, and within the service itself and the contributing stakeholders. Because there we know that there is capacity to really, really make things happen. There's a great will and enormous capacity, and also a lot of motivation, I think. Everybody wants to do the best they can. Everything that's being done is being done brilliantly somewhere, so we know it's doable, and it's about teasing out how we actually do that. My question, I think, now and at the end of the day, and 3 months down the line, will be, what will be visibly different? For my guys in my basketball team, they're not interested in a clause in a commissioning document. They want to see what will be different on the ground and when. I think that's where we are.
Great, I think that's a wonderful challenge, Fiona, thank you.